welcome, Zhecho. I've been knowing Zhecho for a long time now. He has a very interesting career in CX. I'll let him tell that story. So Zhecho, obviously, this is a session on CX leadership, and I'm talking to leaders to hear a bit more about CX leadership itself. We often hear about CX, the field, but I want to focus on leadership, career, lessons learned. So maybe let's start off with just how you see your journey. What was your journey into CX as a CX leader, and also what's your current role now?
Well, maybe I was lucky because just fresh out of the MBA program, I started as an intern to great CX leaders like you and some of the other folks that were in the company. And the company I joined at the time, Beyond Philosophy, was they had published a number of books in the field and were regarded as leaders in the field. So I was coached by some CX leaders with a lot of clout in the field, and I was able to learn, really what I would say also the science and the art of customer experience, because there is a lot of science. I was reading all the research coming from HBR, but statistical science, how you do research, advanced research, and then also psychology. So I would say that I was able to learn kind of like the science of customer experience, which I think is something that most leaders coming just from organizational backgrounds might overlook. And then the art is like, how do you get that in the organization? How do you make change happen? So that's what I would call the art. 15 years on, I published my book. I've been leading at lots of conferences. I have more. I think I counted. I think I had like 45 client engagements, more than 20 research projects, more than 20 journey mapping. So yeah, I would say I already have a lot of experience in the field. And so now I'm senior vice president for customer experience in a new global financial services organization.
Okay, great. For people who don't know you, just your resume. What did you do before this? So you're now SVP at a financial services institution. What was most of your career?
Yeah, so most of my career was like almost 15 years with Beyond Philosophy, one of the first solely dedicated to customer experience organizations. Then I also ventured out myself, so I founded customer experience in Bulgaria. So I had a little practice there as well. I ventured a little bit to the Middle East with Majid Al Futtaim and also with H2O. So we did some projects there. So so as kind of like I grew into the industry, I ventured out, but basically my background's being in customer experience consulting.
Okay, great. And it's interesting. So your career, you said, have been in this space now about 15 years. What would you say are your big lessons as a CX leader, or what you have seen of CX leaders? And the lessons might be positive, they might be negative, but what would be the big lessons that you've taken?
Mm. So I think CX leaders, CX people, they like their tools, like the voice of the customer and things like that. And I'll come back to that one because I think there's I see something as a problem that CX becomes like a tracking thing, but I'll come to that. So to your question, there's a saying in Bulgaria which I think translates poorly in English. But basically it goes something like this, like one bird doesn't make it a spring. So this comes from the geographic area where we are, like, in the winter, the birds fly south to Africa, and in the spring they come back. So the saying is like, when you hear the fact that you heard one bird doesn't make it a spring. So in other words, you need to hear more birds singing to make it a spring. So the lesson this for customer experience for me is that to affect change, a sustainable customer experience change, a sustainable customer experience program that that produces real world results um, going forward and is sustainable, you need kind of like culture change. Maybe this is a big word, but you need to infuse and infect people around the organization with the CX principles and make them enthusiastic, or at least mindful of CX. Because and something that hit me, and I've used this at some conferences. So how many decisions are we making every day? Every day. I think and I researched this on Google, and the answer was the consensus was something like more than 30,000 or even 60,000 per person per day. So even now, shall I listen to Zhecho? Shall I look at my phone? That's a decision people make instantly, and do it like this. And now, if you multiply this by the number of employees in an organization, you get to millions of things every day. Okay, yes, you don't get to millions of decisions that affect the customer every day, but you get the picture. There's lots of small decisions that accumulate over time. And I think my single biggest lesson is like, if you really want to affect change and make this sustainable, because voice of the customer would be reactive. Okay, we see something on the voice of the customer, let's move, let's do a project on this thing. What I've seen from 15 years with organizations that I worked back 10 years ago, with organizations that I worked back 13 years ago, the one that I saw them over time produce and stay on top, and improve their metrics, were the one where lots of people got involved from lots of different organizational departments, where we did some sort of culture change, leadership training, or just lots of people got involved in various projects. And they're the ones that I saw, day after day, year after year, produce results and stay on top of CX. So that's my single best lesson. Like you
Okay,
need
so you're basically saying that you need to have a variety of people from around the organization to participate, be mindful of CX, and to kind of get into the buy-in of it. Um, I think many people would probably agree with this. Many CX practitioners, however, are pigeonholed in many organizations. Sometimes they're told not to speak to certain people or don't have access to those people. Um, you've been a consultant for many years, and I'm sure you've run into situations where you have the ideal, which you just talked about, and then you have the less than ideal, which is probably the majority of the situation. What advice would you give to someone who's in the less than ideal situation where they know they would like to get everyone involved or many people involved, but have been pigeonholed or cordoned off or something along those lines? What would you say to that?
Yep. Well, I've actually done research in this area, and I've seen. So yes, what I described is and like you say, more like an ideal state. But I would say this thing, you don't do this in day one in an organization that is kind of like new to CX. Before you talk to people, I guess you need two, three things in place. One is some of the buy-in to show that this thing works, or you have at least executive buy-in in the organization. And if you don't get that, you need to start, I guess, with your question, with small wins. Prove some remote project somewhere that you can affect something, a change with someone who is friendly, needs your help. So prove it on a small scale. And this is how most programs start. Then as they start to mature, so again, before you talk to everyone about CX, well, what are tools that they can use? So you need your VOC program, and that could be simple. You don't need to buy the big programs yet, but you need to give them some tools or something that they can look, oh, this is what customers say. And then also some tools, maybe train them on journey mapping, or at least have something like that tool or people that they can as a resource that they can tap into. So this is before you start to effect culture change around the organization. I would say that these are 2-3 prerequisites that you need. But coming back to your question about that guy, I'll say start small. I think this is how most programs start, and then take on another project, a bigger one, and then you can start to talk about organizational wide CX strategy.
Okay. Another question. You've been a consultant for most of your career. For CX practitioners on the client side, what advice would you give to them looking to bring on consultancy or advisory? What advice would you give them looking for help?
I would say that they should look for people that they can learn from. Okay, and look for people that they can learn from and use that going forward in their career. So kind of like not people who come up with their black box, think, do things, and then leave. I can, so again, from the distance of 15 years, I could see that I'm very happy for this. I think it shows that we've made change. But some of the people that we did projects that were early on in their careers, like for the first time they're in CX, like what do we do? What does this mean? Now I see those same people in executive leadership roles, and they went through that all the way, having CX in their title. So I'm very happy for that. I remember, like in one case, I was brought in to do. I had worked with that organization for maybe 2-3 years, doing some small things, a speech here, a training to the CX team there, training to some managers, and then they brought me to say, well, I call that something like CX health check. So in other words, hey, we're doing a number of things to on our customer experience program. What are the things we're doing well? What are the things we could improve? What are the things that we're not doing and we should be doing, that kind of like we don't know that we're not doing them? So I went and I did that, and I remember like there was someone was given that, hey, you need to lead CX now. And this was again new into the role. So what does that mean? And I remember that it was the lady at first. She was kind of like nervous or defensive. Oh, we have this guy who's coming and he knows all out, so basically he will tell me all the things I'm doing wrong. But my approach was nothing like that. So like, people don't know what they don't know. So my approach was to help them and guide them and do things. And and I told that lady that we work together, and how to make things. So from that moment we kind of like became friends. We've seen each other, talk about cycling and things like that. And we've kept in touch. And again, she progressed in her career. She moved from one bank to a second bank, and so on, in that CX leadership role. So I would say, look for someone that you can learn from, and the way they would work from you will make you sort of richer in knowledge that you can use going forward.
Okay, all right. How would you test that? I mean, I'm imagining many people would say most of the consultants that I run across, I'm doing, I have a project, I have a program, I'm talking to consultants, some of them from the big consultancies, some of them from boutiques, and I'm sure these are all bright, experienced people, and I'm guessing you can always learn something from someone. So what other than, I mean, because I'm guessing that everyone could learn something from someone. So what are you really saying there about choose someone that you could learn from?
Well, first of all, look at their customer experience background and pedigree. And just the fact that they come from one organization, maybe the big four consultants and things like that, this doesn't mean that they really know their stuff. So look at that. And second is, look at how they would work with you, what they would leave behind. So how much of that is the black box, how much of that is you working with them. So for example, let's say journey mapping. Well, if you'll be doing a journey mapping project, where would they leave you with a journey mapping manual, or something that you can go back to that something, and next time you lead that project. And I remember when we were doing ours, we had created something for actually hospital system, and we're showing them and say, okay, and we're training them, this is how you lead a journey mapping project. And I had something written on the slide, and I'm introducing that exercise, and someone pointed to me, well, hold on, look at this. You just said like 30 words, and you have like 5 words written on the title of the slide. So you just introduced this exercise with like 30 words. We want that. So that's kind of like the level of detail that we went to ensure we pass that knowledge, that knowledge stays with the team after we leave. So yeah, I guess those would be some of the 2 things. One is like look for signs of real deep knowledge, and these will go about things that they're not on the slide, they're not on the proposal. These are things that they say, oh, you know what, once there was this organization that did it. Oh, you know what, this is about this principle, about psychology, and things like that. And those would be the signs that people know their stuff, and they're the signs that are outside of the slides.
All right. Okay, great. And again, you're now on the client side, so you've successfully made the transition from consultant, and I think in particular boutique consultancy, into major client side running kind of CX. What would you say is the allowed you to do that? I would imagine there might be many consultants out there who might be looking for opportunities client side. How did you, in a sense, secure this, or what made you stand out to your now employer? You're running this CX program.
Mhm. Well, first, it was actually intentional that I wanted to make to transition not into another consultancy, um, but into the client side, because actually someone pointed to me a couple of years ago that I have all this experience on the one side, but I don't have it inside the organization. So I wanted to bridge that gap, and I also feel like customer experience, they're still consultants, but I feel like most organizations have CX teams set up in their organizations. And 15 years ago, we were the ones training people how to do that, and how to do those jobs. But to your question, what maybe allowed me is because I think actually they were looking for someone with my background and role, so someone who can run with this inside the organization, because I think they had people with knowledge of the organization. And yeah, that's I mean, this is quite complex. We're talking about hedge funds and things like that here, quite complex industry. There's a lot I need to learn, but they were looking for someone with knowledge of what CX really means, to kind of like educate people along the way, and who be able to run things and programs inside the organization. So when they saw me, I think they saw someone capable of those things.
Okay, good, good, good. And have you seen differences now in your approach to CX? As a consultant versus CX as like as a practitioner within a large organization. What have you had to change?
Yeah, I think patience is the name of the game. So, as a consultant, prior to me going into an organization, obviously I was speaking to the people in the leadership role. So I'm still close to those, but I had kind of like the leadership buy-in to say, hey, come on in, and we're doing this thing. Versus now it is kind of like, okay, we're doing this thing, but trading water carefully. We're doing one thing at a time, and not at the speed that I'm used to. So come in 2 weeks, 2 months, 3 months, something, and then and speaking about this was a funny thing. So with some organizations, when we do research, they say, oh, so you say this thing will take 3 months. Can we do it in 2 months? I say we can, but what I have found is US organization, you can't run at that speed. So I asked them, if I ask you, if I send you this thing, when can you give me a decision to say, yep, this is good. Let's say this is a questionnaire. This is a questionnaire we're going to use in our survey. We're going to send it to your customers. So if I give it to you on Monday, when can you sign it back and give it back to me? Can you sign it on the next day? We can do it in 2 months. Nah, yeah, okay, fine. 3 months, it is the timeline. So I was kind of like used to run at speed, and my first lesson, well, I kind of like I see how things are, but just be patient and look at the big picture and be mindful of people's time and things. So patience is the name of the game for me right now.
Right, right. And also, you're Bulgarian. You have a career. Your career is global. What have you seen, if there is any difference as you look at geographies, as you worked across geographies in the world? Has there been any differences as a CX leader that you have to do, or is it no? It's pretty much the same. I mean, it's minor differences, but pretty much the same. Or is it, or are there differences?
There are certainly differences. Um, so I've spent a lot of time in the States with lots of clients in Europe. I would say the States are typically leading on technology-wise and in innovations, and in Europe they come 2, 3, 5 years. As a CX practitioner, I don't think that changes too much. I think also what I've seen is like in the States, people were used to, okay, because if they get a consultant, no matter where they are, they're still going to be based in one place in the States, and businesses are all over the States. So there, we always used to do things on like 2, 3 trips, and we do it. In England, for example, people are used to people being close to them. So we're doing things on 5 meetings a week, 5 meetings next week, and things like that. So that was something that I found was different. And then in the Middle East, I think there is more emphasis there on trainings. Maybe, at least from what I have, my experience with that has been maybe, if you say, even too much on trainings, because you want to affect. Yes, and I did say trainings are very important because you need to enthuse everyone with the mindset about CX. But maybe there needs to be more emphasis on actually changing things and actually, making a real change in and I would avoid using the word process, a real change in an experience, because oftentimes, they tell me, come and see our processes. And I say, well, I've seen lots of processes in paper. They look fine and logical. In practice, there's a difference between the process and experience. But yeah, maybe these are some of my observations. I had just some experience in China and things, but I don't have enough to talk about differences in there.
Right. Okay. Well, now looking back again at your career and your experience, and thinking about CX, what would you say are things that CX leaders maybe have missed a bit, and maybe including yourself, and all of us? What will be like a weakness or a thing that you think, we really kind of have dropped the ball, or we have this blind side in our approach to things?
Well, it's something of a concern of mine, what I've seen. And I've read about this and even wrote about it in my book, which was 2, 3 years ago, when I was writing it, and before that I read it. But now, and to go into this role, I had a few interviews. I see it even more, and I'm more concerned that customer experience programs are becoming just tracking programs. So in other words, and I'll really give you one story of a company that I didn't even do an interview. I just spoke with a person in that role. So now that we have all these voice of the customer tracking mechanisms, instead of being like, okay, this is how we affect real change, the programs are just moving into, okay, we have the CX metrics. This is now what the these quarterly readings are, and that's the thing. And then move on to the next quarter and see what next quarter readings are. And yeah, maybe okay, we saw this spike, we just did this small thing. So that is my worry, that they just become tracking mechanisms instead of drivers of real and sustainable change. So to give you this example that I told you, that was like, so I see that there is a CX leadership role in this bank, and I actually know one person that works in the bank. I know her because once she was in a telecom, and I went and I pitched to their team, and I know her because when my book came out, and she wrote me and stuff like that, so we exchanged a couple of notes about the book. So I see the role, and I actually gave her a call, and she said actually it's her boss that has just left. But she said, I'm not sure this is for you, because you know what they really liked about my boss, and he was from mathematical background, is he is very good to do this report, which in other markets, geographical markets, they have all these automations and systems. It will, you just crunch a few numbers and the system spits it out. But here, he had set up the system that he'll spend like 2 months on or 3 months on that report to get that report to people. So this was like, so you want the CX leader, and what you want from that is to produce you this report that he spends 2 months crunching some numbers. So that's not what. And actually, we never even got to speak or to do an interview for those guys. So that for me was a sign, was another telling sign that it's just becoming a reporting function instead of a leader driving a meaningful change for customers and inside the organization. So that is something that I would advise people to avoid going into that, for me, rabbit hole.
Okay. And what do you see as the impact of AI on that and maybe the CX role? Does AI mean it becomes more of a tracking, or does AI, do you think, will take us in different directions? What's your general thoughts on that?
So I'll take a step back. The way I see things, and I think how most people should see technology. So I was in Seattle when Amazon Go store first launched in that first week. It was on the news. I went in, I queued outside the store. So that Amazon Go store, the concept was there's no cashiers. You go in, you download the app, you scan the app, and you have your credit card there. You go into the store, you just grab whatever you want, put it in the basket, leave the store. You feel like you've robbed the store, but your bill comes, so there's no cashiers. But the learning for me there is like what they have moved the human element to is where they can add more value. So how they were adding value there is, instead of being scan your thing, they're inside the store, and you can ask them, oh, where do I find this thing, where do I find this other thing. And also they have changed the business model. So instead of needing a bigger store um, with big space for shelves, because you don't have people stocking the shelves and you have cashiers, now you have people stocking the shelves and you need shorter shelves. So the learning there was, you need to move the human element to places where they can add more value, and technology to deal with the things that are automated or they don't add value. So then some organizations have asked us about that. Which journeys do we automate or digitize? Where do we retain or move the human element? So coming back to AI, I think that's how they should see. They should see this, okay, for this type of thing, we can use AI to help people get answers quickly, do this, do that. And we should retain or keep the human element to these areas where they can spend more time, add more value. So, for example, just yesterday or the day before, I read about McDonald's um, doing a big push into AI. They're going to put AI with 44,000 of their stores in the States. But what they're going to use that is like, well, it's not good for customer experience if you go into a McDonald's store and you can't buy your milkshake because the machine is broken. But now, for years they've been installing um, those tracking devices that for maintenance. So now AI can be analyzing this data, and you can have proactive maintenance and say, hey, this machine is about to break in 5 days time. So if you do that, you have less customers being disappointed from going into a store for a milkshake and the machine is not working. So so the challenge for CX leaders is to find where the areas that AI can add value in the customer experience, and how do we get AI to help people and not sort of to compete people, because I think where AI will add the real value is not where they would replace people, but where people can use AI to do. So let's say you're a salesperson, you just had this meeting with me, or I think it's actually you're doing that. AI will be taking notes, and you can do a summary, you can do a blog, you can put whatever I'm saying as a transcription on the screen if people have difficulties hearing understanding my accent, or even if they can't see, even if anyway, you get the point. So the point is, how do we get AI to help people, and not how do we replace people with
Right.
AI? Because I think that at least at this moment, that is something that I don't think will work, or at least for some basic things it will work. But the
So
point is
basically, augment, yeah, augment, not replace.
augment that. That's
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, got it. So as a final question, you mentioned your book, but you didn't mention the title. Can you just kind of give us what's your book? What's it about? Why did you write it? And just kind of a quick synopsis of what you found.
Sure. Well, actually, it's a good point, because you asked me what are people missing and so on. So the book is called "The Big Miss: How Organizations Overlook the Value of Emotions." And I'll tell you what made me write it. And I wrote it when during the COVID lockdown. At least that's when I started writing, because I had this lingering question in my mind. And suddenly I had time, and I had a big database that I can tap into. So what made me think is, like, I have seen time and time again relationships being important in business. And again, when we ask people, sales guys and other people, how important are relationships important in business, everyone shakes hands. But you know what? We have done lots of research, and when you put it in research and you ask people, how, like, is feeling a relationship with the organization, well, you don't ask it like, basically, if you put feeling a relationship with your brand, with X brand, and other things like price of this product, reliability of the product, and stuff like that, people always choose price of the product, reliability of the product, and stuff like that. And that feeling of that relationship with the brand in the research comes like way down the line when you put it like consciously, like what is important to you. People consciously say price is important, this feeling thing is not important. But we have done this research many times, and we know that when you use these advanced analytics and predictive analytics, you do find that that feeling with that relationship with a brand is the biggest driver and predictor of how likely they're to buy again, of things like NPS, likelihood, preference over the competition, things like that. So I know that. So but then again, everyone does journey mapping, right? I've seen lots of journey maps and steps. Where in that journey map is the place where we map how we develop relationships with organizations? And what I have found is no one is doing that, because everyone does the first step, second step, third step of the journey, and so on. And there isn't a step called forming relationships with with, and no one, because it's not consequential, it's not linear. So people were overlooking that part. So I went back to our data to see on a large scale with 25 plus clients. I analyzed 59 models, in other words, segments from businesses in Asia, Europe, the States, and so on, Africa. And I found that yes, relationships are a bigger driver of value. But when I look at that, when I look at what forms that relationship, I found it's not just about that feeling of relationship, but it was about also making customers feel valued, cared for, respected, that they're listened to. So it was more than that feeling of relationship. And if you think about who do you really have relationships with in your real life, it's like your family, close friends, and stuff. And what makes those relationships are those emotions, those emotional bonds. So that's how I got into actually it's more than that feeling of relationships. It's about emotions. And in the book, I show evidence from my research, evidence from research from other organizations, of how emotions are important drivers of human behavior and behaviors towards organizations and purchases, and what can organizations do about that as a strategy, as a purposeful strategy. Because again, most people think, well, emotions, but what do you do with them? So I've wrote about how you can be purposeful about evoking certain emotions and using emotions in your CX strategy.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, it's an interesting read. I have to say, I enjoyed it, and I would recommend anyone to have a look at it because this is very interesting. Zhecho, Senior Vice President now at a global financial services institution. 15 years at least as a consultant, worked around the globe. Thanks for your insights. And I think if anyone wants to get in touch with you, they can probably contact you on LinkedIn, find your name there. And thanks so much for that.
Thank you. Always a pleasure with you, being with you.